Ray. What do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
All right, yo, let's get into it.
Try to take over the world.
Reaching
Try to take over the world.
And greatest chaplain in the world, Mr.
Try
Lance
to
O'Neill.
take over the world.
Yo, what up, everybody? This is your boy KJ Bradley, the greatest chaplain in the world, Mr. Lance O'Neill. We are here live and in full effect for a special interview today. We are going to bring you guys a guy we tried to get on a while ago, but we, for whatever reason, the scheduling just didn't work out. I messed it up. But man, I am so excited to have him here, Mr. Jesse Hirsh, who's going to come in. He's a futurist, a farmer. God, his background is so extensive. I can't wait to dig in. So we're going to jump in. Before we do, Chappie, how are you?
Same as always. I'm good. Oh, no. We lost KJ right at the start. This happens every once in a while. So we're going to give KJ a chance to come back in. I think he's there he is. Ooh.
Yeah, man. It's you know, these Cali grids are wild, man. So I'm going to be in and out apparently today. It's all right though. That's why we record it, so I can edit it out. But how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, no worries, no issues I want to share right now.
Let's get it. All right. Without further ado, I want to introduce everybody to Mr. Jesse Hirsh. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm great. How are you guys?
I'm well, man. So it looks like Cali's gonna do its Cali thing, so I'll be popping in and out unintentionally. So if I disappear, just keep rocking. I'll be back shortly. Just is what it is with this Cali grid. But before we get started, man, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us about your background. I have so many questions. I'm so excited. Definitely gonna ask about the crypto thing. We got to get into a lot of stuff. But go ahead. I'll let you introduce yourself to our audience, and then we'll come back and hit it.
You know, I'm a really curious person, and my entire life I've always focused on learning, and that means a lot of technology, a lot of using technology to learn. And I'm kind of the person who people like to come with their questions. And again, these are usually technology questions. Sometimes they're political questions. And about 10 years ago, I went back to school and I got a degree in AI. And it was really an extension of a life of technology. But when I decided what I was going to do with AI, farming seemed to be the best bet, partly because technology and farming are inseparable. Technology and tools really got their start at farming, but also because don't go where everyone's like you. Go where you're different. Go where there's opportunities. And at that time, I thought AI would make a huge impact in farming. And lo and behold, it has. So I'm interested in AI in terms of the world, but farming is where I apply it. It's where it really makes sense, especially in terms of making my own food. And right now, I'm actually obsessed with building my own farm robot. And I'm kind of in the process of doing that as kind of the ultimate application of both my knowledge in technology and my passion for farming.
So the first thing I think of when farm robots, I'm a geek, and this will tell you, R2-D2 and C-3PO.
The originals, right? The originals, a bot to be farming robots, but didn't really get much work on the job before they took off.
Like realistically, yeah, they were on the farm seriously for like 6 hours before R2 took off, and C-3PO didn't get a chance to use any of his. I was a loader originally, a programmed to be a loader. When was he originally programmed to be a loader? I mean, that's retro. So that's
I was going to say a lot of retconning going on there.
Yeah. So we'll let KG get a question in before he drops off again.
Yeah, I know. It's so wild. This is so frustrating, but hopefully this is the last week of me being in a transient. All right. So first question. All right. So I had them written down because I was really looking forward to it. So what was the first moment, or maybe series of moments, where you realized that technology wasn't just a tool, but also a political and ecological force? Was it when you went into school?
Yeah, that's maybe one of the best questions anyone's ever asked me, KJ. So let me start with that. I love right back at you. Yes, it was high school, and it was high school for a couple of reasons. I was really getting into the Black Panther Party, for example.
Nice.
They were an independent study project for me, and I was fascinated by how they printed their own newspaper and how they used technology to print their own newspaper. And this was before the internet, but it was when desktop publishing, WordPerfect, was around, and I started using technology to make my own newsletter. First a sports one, then a political one. So it was first media and politics, and recognizing that media and politics are connected, but then technology and politics, because I got onto the internet, I guess in university. And again, it was I just saw the future was going to be about the internet. The future was going to be about politics and the internet. So I guess it was something I didn't really think of, and yet like gravity, I was attracted to. And I really kept connecting the dots between media, technology, and power, and who has access to power, and who gets attention, and who we listen to as kind of the prerequisite for power.
I like that. All right. So with that being said, we are in a state of Chappie and I, we've kind of had this ongoing discussion in our pod over the last couple of months when it comes to media and its influence in today's politics. Just curious to what are your thoughts before we move on?
It's kind of the snake that eats itself, right? On the one hand, media makes so much money off politics. You have to remember, I'm Canadian, and the Canadian media industry has kind of been dead for almost 10 years because we don't have elections like you guys do, right? Mm-hmm. When you have elections every 2 years and presidential elections every 4 years, that's a lot of money for the media business, and especially a lot of money for the local media business. So our media industry, because we don't have that, because we have campaign spending limits, our media has been dead. Like, we just have Google and Facebook. That's it. Like that's who runs all the media here. So you really get a sense of the snake that eats itself. And that the one hand, the media wouldn't exist without Trump. The media wouldn't exist without the circus that is American politics. But on the other hand, the media has become the enemy. So now they're sort of vilifying. And I've been watching how PBS and NPR are under attack. So on the one hand, the media kind of made Trump. The media kind of made the political moment we have right now. And yet, they've never been more threatened. They've never been more perilous. So it's a paradox, right? It's a weird thing. It creates itself and eats itself on a never-ending cycle.
Well, you can look at some of that stuff, though. You go back further into 2014 and 15, the left-wing media in the U.S. was pushing for Trump because they thought, oh, he'll be absolutely wiped out by Hillary. He's the joke. Like, he's not the serious one. And then he started kind of getting a little traction. I think Trump even will admit, like, he wasn't serious to begin with. He just wanted I think I've read some interviews where he's like, I just wanted them to talk about a certain things, 2 or 3, and then I was gonna be done. And then he got pushed in by the left-wing media, and suddenly he became kind of a viable. And then he kind of got on the roll. And then eventually, when he was nominated, the left went, "Oh, great! We've got Hillary. She'll just wipe the floor with him." And then you see all the videos of the funniest memes we have are all because of, MSNBC and them pushing Trump, saying, yeah, he'll be great because he'll be a walkover Hillary, and totally misreading the room.
Well, and to your point, perhaps the greatest hypocrisy are the late night comedy and news satire shows, because they've made a fortune over the last 15 years. And on the one hand, they've made fun of the news as being farcical and satirical, but they're now making more money than the news ever did, to your point, off of the rise of Trump, off of not just the Trump side, but the polarization, the partisanship, the fact that there is no dialogue, there is no debate, there is no discussion in policy anymore. It's just combat. And the other thing, just briefly, that I think you touch upon is the arrogance. That there's been an arrogance to the mainstream media, whether left or right. which they felt that they always knew what was going on. And every time they didn't. They had no clue what was going on. And I think that also leaves them with some legitimate egg on their face. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I think that what you just said is so funny because you look at, who started that? Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart came in and absolutely killed everybody, every Republican, anybody who's a conservative, everybody on the right. And now fast forward 15 years, he goes, well, this just isn't right, how divided we are. You guys should sit down and have conversations. And if you look back, you go, Jon Stewart was the one going, George W. Bush is an effing communist. He's a fascist. He's the worst person ever. How could they have this complete moron in the White House? How did we as Americans let this idiot? And now fast forward and you go, dude, like, yes, John, you are now the person we should listen to about the media and how fair we should be. You're very much like Jimmy Kimmel, who we should listen to as the heart of America. Dude, you were the guy who had women on trampolines. Let's not go too high on Jimmy Kimmel being a moral ethicist.
Well,
just a thought.
And what I find fascinating about Jon Stewart is to my point about arrogance, he really had a lot of humble pie when Apple basically canceled him. Right? Yeah, like on the one hand, he left at the top, right? He left at the peak, sort of having his victory laps as Colbert kind of came in and inherited his mantle. But he really didn't. He's been feeling a lot of remorse lately because Apple, gave him a big deal, then took it away. He came back to the Daily Show kind of hat in hand saying, please, can I have a role? Yeah. So I think there is, for lack of a better phrase, a lot of lamenting, a lot of regret, a lot of sense that they really blew it. And granted, it's too little too late. But there is a lot of hypocrisy in the media industry. And I don't think they've really... I don't think they've seen that yet. I don't think they understand. I think they're still in denial. Yeah. And that's what makes, I feel, this point in history so difficult to be in, because it is a lot of conspiracy. It's a lot of nonsense. It's a lot of arrogance. It's a lot of just pure cacophony. That's why I love podcasts. That's why I listen to podcasts. But it is frustrating in terms of if you had told me when I was younger that on the one hand, we'd have all this great technology and it would result in an increase in stupidity, I would not have believed you at all.
Well, that's kind of one of the jokes is what can we get the Democrats to support just by having Trump say, hey, we should, like Trump comes out and goes, porn is bad for young men. Oh, no. Porn's great. We need to keep porn. And it's like, do you guys hear yourselves? Like, I'm all for freedom of speech. And I think, there are some things that when we're talking about age limits and books in schools, we can probably come to a pretty good. But like, if Trump came out and said, I think we need to ban human baby brains before 6 months old. How dare you put that limit on what we want to eat? If we want to eat a baby's brain, we should be able to do it. And it's that level of just insanity that you go, where are we? Where are we? I'm sure Canada's a little bit different. I don't follow. I watched a little bit.
Not really. It's still the same duck season, rabbit season.
That is a great way of putting it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, while Canada does have some differences, and I pointed out the media industry that we don't really have one anymore.
Yeah,
we still have the same culture. There's a North American culture. There really isn't a Canadian or American, and that was what was so dangerous about Trump's threats to take over Canada. Because
did you guys really believe that though? Did you really think? Really? Like how did? Okay, this is fascinating to me. How did Canadians think this was going to happen?
And we didn't. No. We did. It's not logical. It's not rational. You don't think how it's going to happen. Although I did write a short story, kind of War of the World style, that freaked people out. It really is just the size differential, right? Like it's like it wasn't even. We don't need to get into the logistics of how this would happen. It wouldn't take much. Like, it really, like, I mean, the guerrilla warfare after, okay, sure, yes. But allow me to step back and frame this another way.
You're going to throw syrup, you hoser. Get out.
If instead of a threat, it was seduction, right? Like, if instead of a threat, it was, hey, guys, we got so much in common. We do so much business together. Your old people hang out in Florida. Our hunters spend time in your north. You know, how can we work something out? That would have been a totally different story, right? And that would have been, honestly, I think, a very friendly conversation. But there is this real deep-seated fear that has existed in the entirety of the Canadian history and identity, which is America's going to come and take us over. And just the thought of it caused us to dump a load in our pants collectively. And it changed our politics completely. And like when I go to the grocery store now, no, it still has. Right?
Okay.
Like you have to remember the liberals were dead in the water.
Right. Yeah. That's what I mean.
Dead in the water.
Yeah.
And the fact that they are still in power and that they have like it boggles the mind. They're still hated though. That's the paradox. This country hates Trump so much that we would rather be with the enemy we know than the enemy we don't know type of logic. So Canada right now is in a very precarious place. And I say this, the last point I'm going to make is in our grocery store right now, all products have not just the price, a red maple leaf or not, right? That tells you whether that food comes from Canada or whether it comes from elsewhere. And it's making a huge difference. Like the amount of consumer patriotism, for lack of a better phrase, is a major economic force. And Buffalo, New York now has ads on the highway in Toronto saying, we miss you, come see us, we're friends, please, because they've lost a ton of cross-border traffic. I digress. KJ, you got to get in.
No, that's fine. No. But one of those things about the little tags, this is, I think, a true difference, is that when you have those little tags, tell me if I'm wrong, you probably don't have a lot of people saying, well, that's racist. Because if we put those fat flags in America, you'd have half of the population going, how dare you I'm offended by that little flag. That flag is the flag of people that oppress the slaves and that is against the Mexicans and hates brown people and black people.
But
I don't get it.
But this goes to your earlier point of maybe Canada's not as crazy as America's. Well, we are, because people are doing that. So that is happening. Yes, that is happening. But because we don't have the media industry you do, it's not amplified. So, yeah, it's all over the Facebook groups. Yeah, it's all over like the same places people are making the TikToks, but there isn't Fox News, right? There isn't a really big megaphone putting it out there. So the sentiment still exists. The craziness still exists. And look, there's a flip side to this. You know how many of those red little flags are on products that are not made in America, in Canada, but nonetheless, they say like
marketing 101.
Yeah, like it's like, this is what I'm saying. It's all a house of mirrors. No matter where you are, it's just a question of how loud the volume is or the stereo is. KJ, please, you gotta jump in.
Man, listen, I am enjoying this thoroughly. We've switched roles. I'm sitting back just listening and enjoying it. All right, so let me see if we can get this dive back in. My God. So you obviously, Jesse, you've worn a ton of hats, right? You've been researcher, broadcaster, farmer, now futurist. So what do you think the through line is that connects all these roles? Like, was there a turning point where you stopped compartmentalizing them all and just appreciated the evolution of your journey?
I the last part of that question, again, is the best part of that question. It's only recently that I've kind of allowed them all to morph into who I am and how I spend each hour of every day. A lot of those titles reflect on how hard you got to hustle to get paid in life. Yeah. And that, sometimes who you are doesn't matter. It's what you're willing to do. Right. And where the opportunities are, in the sense that I always try to be ahead of the curve. I always try to go to where the puck is. economically and technologically. But I'd say, to answer the core part of the question, learning. I love to learn. I wake up every day. If I have a good learning project and I'm focused on that, I mentioned earlier when unfortunately got cut off that I'm building a robot right now, a farm robot. Yeah. And it is the culmination of really the last 10, 15 years of my learning in terms of electronics, programming, welding, which I taught myself in the last year. And so I'm really pumped about that. But all this has been learning. So like the researcher part, I've always kind of been a researcher in that I'm always feeding my brain. And then I just find ways that people want knowledge, and then they'll pay me to go get them some knowledge. And hey, that makes you a researcher. And the farming bit is really my prepper or doomer kind of concept of like, the more I look at climate change, the more I look at the economics of the world and, you know, growing geopolitical conflict, the more I want my food in my backyard so that I don't have to go anywhere when I'm hungry, and are getting closer and closer to that state.
Well, global warming was good for you then, because it gives you a longer time to actually harvest.
It is and it isn't. Yes, it is very much expanding the growing season. It's quite phenomenal how that's happening. But it's also bringing bigger storms. So I see bigger storms as an opportunity because I do believe that farming is not controlling nature. It's harnessing nature. And if nature is getting stronger, well, then there's more to harness. But it is a risk and reward. And in that sense, it is all bets are off, I think, is the main way that I approach it. So that's, again, well, I want to make sure that I am the one who's growing my food. So I have a direct line.
So what made you turn your rural farm into like a media lab? Like what was that? What made you make that pivot?
I mean, that goes back to your first question. Media is power. And we all want power, and it's a question of how we leverage that power. I mean, for most farmers, especially the farmers who are kind of younger and hipper, media is marketing, right? So you use media as a way to connect with a more premium audience, an audience that's willing to pay a higher dollar for your products because of the morality or the ethics or the culture or just the look of your goat that they just happen to have a good cut to their jib, as it were. But also it's power in the community. I'm an outsider, right? I'm from the city. So all of a sudden I will be distrusted for the next 30, 40 years amongst everyone here. You know, my children will probably be distrusted. So it helps that I volunteer for the local radio and have a technology spot on the local radio so people hear me, and, you know, put out a podcast where I'll sometimes bring on locals and talk about local stories. So media is power, and it's important to use media to tell your story and to distinguish yourself, because I am different, right? I mean, most people, to go back to the patriotism that Canada is currently gripped by, you know, most people fly Canadian flags, just like in America. Most people fly American flags, right? Most of the farms here have that. Versus we fly two flags. We fly a pride flag, partly because it pisses a lot of people off here. In fact, last year there's big forest fires in June, and the big conspiracy was that it was God lighting these forest fires because June was Pride Month. And that's when I decided to fly the pride flag. I was like, okay, if you think these forest fires are God's anger against gay folks, then I'm going to side myself with the gay folks. And then we also fly a flag of our dog. Partly as a beware of dog, because our dogs are very protective. So we're weird, like really weird. And it's important that our neighbors know that we're harmless, that we're friendly, that even though we're weird, we're not that different from they are. And media helps, right? Media helps on the one hand, make everyone crazy, but on the other hand, maybe it's the antidote to that craziness, depending on the circumstances.
I just can't believe you don't have a gay dog flag.
It's a good idea. I'm gonna have to talk to ChatGPT on how to brainstorm that. Not bad.
Well, you can go early. You can go early South Park with it.
Well, that's just it. South Park is definitely one of my cultural influences, as was Pinky and the Brain. These are, I think, where we understand not just our notion of freedom of speech, but cultural weirdness. Yes. Because my other professional operating philosophy is when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. So speaking of that, tell me more about your podcast. Tell me about your platform and your podcast a little bit.
So MetaViews is kind of my brand. It's a reluctant brand in that I think I've been using this brand for almost 20 years now. And it really means big picture, like the meta view. I'm interested in the big picture, but I'm also interested in like not the clear big picture, but the really abstract, weird, surreal big picture. So I used to describe meta views as cyberpunk surrealism, in that it was sort of cyberpunk, but also surrealist. But these days it's much more boring, political. MetaViews is really about trying to make sense of the world when it's nonsense. And we're just wrapped season 2 of the podcast. It's interviews, it's spontaneous conversations. And it's really about the intersection of like religion and politics and culture and technology. And so on the one hand, it's kind of everything goes, but really it's just my therapy. So it's an indirect way to get into the back of my brain, shared with the public so that when you find yourself in court, the prosecutors will have a lot of evidence to use against you. And I don't know why I do that. I regret it after the fact. But I also do a daily Substack, a sort of daily newsletter, and it's philosophical. I try to explore, different ideas, different concepts. Recently, I published an article I'm rather proud of, in which I argue that echo chambers are a myth, that there's no such thing as an echo chamber. To go back to our point about arrogance, the mainstream media love the concept of the echo chamber because it allows them to dismiss everyone but them. When the reality of the internet is we hear opposing views all the time. We constantly hear people who disagree with us. You say anything on the internet, someone's going to tell you you're wrong. So I actually think that the echo chambers are just a fabrication of the mainstream media, and that, in fact, there are no echo chambers. On the internet, we all hear each other, and we all hear contradictory views. And I think we should be honest about that.
Yeah, I liken it to being at a concert. Everyone's talking, but nobody's hearing anything.
Brilliant. Well said.
Chappie, what you got?
To be fair. Let's see if you get the reference. You get the reference, right?
No, actually.
Oh, well, then I have to ask you, what's your favorite? Like, you don't watch Letterkenny?
No.
No,
never seen an episode. I'll tell you why. And it's been a bit of a quick tangent. I'm kind of in another podcast network, which includes people who produce the Produce Stand, which is a Letterkenny podcast. And I hate that show. Never watched it. If I see a clip, I move forward. And here's why. I really don't like the people they depict. I feel that it's city people making fun of rural people.
Probably.
That even though a lot of rural people love the show, and it is true to a kind of small town Ontario, right? Which is sort of what it riffs on. It's just not like, so I love SCTV. Like if I were to pick one show that I would die for, it's SCTV. And SCTV made fun of Canada, made fun of rural Canada, but it did it in a way that Letterkenny, and granted, like I also love Trailer Park Boys. Like die hard Trailer Park Boys. And Letterkenny just makes me feel like it's Trailer Park Boys, but like too corporate, kind of too. But again, I haven't watched it, so I'm ignorant saying that.
So I will push back on that because Letterkenny is one of my favorites. It has one of the highest levels of dialogue writing that I think I've seen.
Yes.
Very, very snappy dialogue.
Well, theater background, the people who did it, they're really talented.
Yeah. And I think the thing that they do is they actually show it's almost like, hey, here's a bunch of hicks, but they're actually really smart. So they're not really hicks. They are hardworking. They do a good job. Now you have some of them like the degens that, the druggies that, go around and just want to dance in the parking lot and all that. But even then they kind of give them some redeeming arcs. But the core guys, I think very much so. Like you have Dan, the big, the heavyset guy, and he's going to school and learning all this stuff about, feminism and all these things. So, and educating himself. And so I never thought of it. I never thought it was making fun of them.
But that's my point. That's all city people. Like, you're correct in the sense that the main thing you understand living in rural is people are really smart here. Like, really, because you have to be. Yeah. Right? You don't have, like, the thing about a city is the city allows idiots to be idiots. Yeah. Because the city provides everything to you. You don't have to know where your food comes from. You don't have to, like, everything in the city is there on a platter. But when you live in the country, at some level, you got to deal with your own stuff. You got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of people. So, yes, I agree that the depiction of people in country and rural settings, they are very smart. They are very sophisticated. But they definitely don't speak that way. And they definitely don't act that way. And they're definitely not interested in the kind of subjects they're interested in. Versus Trailer Park Boys, to use as an example, there was both an authenticity to that show, but at the same time, like, those were talented actors and it was talented writers and it was talented television, but it was real. Like, that was Nova Scotia. Like, that was legit Nova Scotia. Like, no one in Nova Scotia is going to be upset about. They love Trailer Park Boys. Versus Letterkenny's a little more divisive. Like, it is, I still would argue it's theater majors living in Toronto who have friends who live in the country who say, let's do a positive depiction of country life, but the cadence and the poetry and the language is urban. Like, it's still urban to me. But again, we're nitpicking. But go ahead, push back.
Okay. So I'll push back because you said Trailer Park Boys is realistic. Last time I checked, Alex Lifeson has not been kidnapped from his hotel anytime recently.
You know what I mean when I say realistic. The plot lines were absurd. But I know a Bubbles. I know a Ricky. I know a Julian. I know a Corey. I know a Trevor. Like, these are real Canadians, right? And I say this in the honest to God kind of hoser. Same with SCTV, like Bob and Doug McKenzie. Those were classic Canadians. But again, we digress. Like, we could go to like Jackass, right? Like, how many Americans are like Steve-O? Right? Or like how, and this is, but that's my point. That's my point. This is versus like the Real Housewives of, Manhattan or whatever. Man. So like what used to be okay, I'm going to roll this back and give a researcher's hypothesis. The early days of reality television were almost authentic versus the contemporary reality television.
It's scripted.
Like,
it is
Velveeta.
Well, today what it is we're going to give you the premise for today's show and you guys ad lib it. But we're going to hit the marks. And it's not, like you said, it's not authentic. I remember watching The Real World, which is kind of the granddaddy of all, and you would watch that and go, wow, look at these people. Like and I think San Francisco might have been the last real one. When the puck guy, although I will say character because he characterized himself on purpose, when he's sitting there basically saying, hey, the dude with AIDS, I forget his name, but he's calling out the guy with AIDS for having AIDS, and you're like, holy, that would not happen today. Pedro, right? So you wouldn't have that. So there was this reality, and then the roommates get together and kick him out, and you go, yeah, that's what should happen. Whether you agree with Pedro and his lifestyle or not, Puck, dude, you're eating peanut butter out of the community with your fingers. These are things I remember about this show from 20 odd years ago. So there's this realistic where you go, yeah, this really is they just kind of put cameras in there and just let them go.
So here's an interesting consequence of that I was thinking about earlier today. It strikes me that there are a growing number of Americans who genuinely believe the conspiracy that the NFL is more like the World Wrestling Entertainment than it is baseball. That it is a scripted kind of like, there's still athleticism, there's still a certain amount of competition, but you know who's going to win the match at the end of the day. Yeah. I don't believe that myself, but the amount of people who are starting to believe that strikes me as a symptom of a larger, deep distrust in American culture that I'd love to hear your thoughts on.
So that's what it is. It's the deeper distrust in authority. I was talking to somebody literally yesterday about this of, do you trust the NBA, MLB, or NFL? Because, you know, here's the Dallas Mavericks who trade away Luka Doncic, arguably one of the top, not arguably, is one of the top 5, if not 3 best players in the world, for an older all NBA guy that's always hurt and like 1 draft pick. And then they win the lottery. And I've seen videos on how they do the lottery. There's basically no way you could fake the lottery, right? But at the same time, there's enough that we've seen, like the Lakers Kings Game 6 in the early 2000s. There's these phantom calls. And I was thinking about that yesterday as well, about the NFL, specifically thinking, how many phantom penalties would a ref have to call to truly affect a game? How many holding calls could you make that would really genuinely, other than in any type of close game, right? And that's where the distrust becomes, because you can watch, and even the announcers, you know, Aikman and Romo will be like, how are they calling that? Like, that's a horrible call. And you know, they are owned by the NFL to some degree, but they still have some license to say what they think. And I think that's where it kind of comes from, because you sit there and you go, there are enough of these calls. And then if you take the clips and put them all together and you don't say, well, hey, here's 10 clips through the entire season of literally 10,000 calls that look really hinky. Well, yeah, I mean, I can 1/100th of, or 1/1000th or 1/10,000th of any play, I can put them together and make them look like, oh, look, this is completely rigged. The NFL's rigged, the NHL's rigged, golf is rigged. Watch this. And show, you know, the head breaking off, or, you know, somebody just missing a putt that goes line and go bloop, and it's like, well, oh, it must be it. Oh, it's all a conspiracy. They have magnets under the greens. Maybe that would be a good one. Maybe that's what we should do, is we can put together a clip of 10 different times where the ball just kind of turned when it doesn't seem like it should. And then say there's magnets on underneath the greens of these major events, and they just want their people to win.
It can happen.
Oh, sure. That's what Augusta's known for. It's for putting magnets underneath.
Oh my God. Do you know the conspiracy? Man, listen, there'd be a lot of people upset. All right, we got to get back to business, though. So you mentioned that you're building a robot, Jesse. And then you've also kind of advocated for citizen science and shaping local futures and that sort of thing, right? So I want to hear your thoughts on this idea I was running. What if the next phase involved like a hybrid citizen machine research team? Kind of like where, you know, maybe you got like rural AI teammates that support the local farmers with like on-site sensors, predictive models, or closed loop environmental feedback, that sort of thing. Kind of working together as co-researchers to help build out, you know, soil health and biodiversity to produce better crops without, you know what I'm saying, without the waste and the overture. What are your thoughts?
I think that's the future of libraries. Because on the one hand, if you think about the role libraries historically played, it was about knowledge and sharing knowledge in the form of books. But now that knowledge is often software. It's often technology. It might be soil data. It might be crop data. It might be livestock data. So 100%. And the question is, what form will this cooperation take? Because the other side to this is the miracle and paradox of open source software. Because you know, not a lot of non-nerds know the role that open source software has played on the internet the last 30 years. Yeah. And especially in AI right now and software development and the whole rise of vibe coding in terms of getting AI to do the software for you. The problem or the paradox of open source is it's hard to find stuff. It's hard to know what's available. You know, what Microsoft and other corporate software providers do really effectively is market, right? They sell to people. Like what John Deere does to farmers is sell them technology. And farmers don't have the time to go and research that stuff on their own. So imagine if the local library, you know, at the start of the growing season or in the winter, offered free workshops on how to take advantage of this technology, how to build your own farm robots, how to automate your 1980s tractor, which there are people on TikTok doing. So, you know, part of it is connecting all that knowledge together. And there is a cooperative culture in farming communities. And what's interesting in the United States right now is because the combination, the fluctuation in commodity pricing, you know, combined with the general uncertainty that farmers always face, there is a huge resurgence in cooperative efforts. Oh. And I don't mean literal cooperatives. Sometimes these are just Facebook groups, right? Sometimes these are just people on TikTok sharing stuff. But you evoked this idea of not just a knowledge sharing, but technology collaboration and building technology and deploying technology together. And I think that is increasingly happening. It's just a matter of how do we formalize it? And that's why I use the word library. I think institutions are important. I think that's why you have churches. That's why you have, you know, community associations. That's why you have, in Canada, at least hockey rinks. I'm assuming in the United States, baseball diamonds or football fields. But communities get together for reasons. And I think technology is an excellent reason for that. And I think farming and agricultural technology is a win-win because, you know, farmers for the most part don't have a lot of time and don't have a lot of resources. So being able to share these types of solutions when they're not really competing with each other, they're, you know, in essence, cooperating with each other to grow more food and everyone benefits.
So I know, so on your farm, you talked about kind of how you like to integrate tradition and technology, right? So have you ever thought about using your digital lab to kind of host like a temporal GIS, like a layered digital mapping of like past ecological states, ancestral knowledge, and futuristic scenarios to kind of help drive the current decision making and then prep the way for when you're gone?
An almanac?
KJ, that is absolutely brilliant. Please promise me as a researcher yourself that you're going to give a quick Google or a chat GPT to see if anyone has ever done that.
I don't know.
Because that is absolutely brilliant. Because what you describe exists on an oral level, right? It exists in a verbal culture. And we've been on this. So we were able to buy this farm because it was dilapidated, it had been let to go. And we have used our goats to basically reclaim a lot of the property, including the original foundation of the house that was here 150 years ago. Nice. And in doing that, it's kind of archaeology because I'm finding little old containers and bricks and like all this stuff. So I would love to be able to use scanners and sensors and AI and local history to map out what had happened on the land before, and then create a system to kind of maintain the land further. And of course, while this is true in America, even more so here in Canada, there is a process of reconciliation with our First Nations, with Indigenous communities. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, one of the first things we learn about North America is that North America was never wild, right? Like we had this idea that North America was wild, the Europeans came and then they cultivated it. Yeah, but the civilizations that lived in North America have been farming for tens of thousands of years. They've been cultivating the land here forever. So to your point, someone's been farming this. Maybe not the way that Europeans farm, but they've been farming it. And there is this one part of my land that clearly had a lot of animal poop on it decades and decades ago, because it just grows different and all the vegetation grows different. So again, that is an absolutely brilliant idea. The short answer is I don't yet have the resources to do that. But what I did do, because we have, not as a tangent, so our property is a mix of open pasture and woodlot. And here in Ontario, you can get a very generous tax break if you manage your woodlot, i.e. promise not to cut it all down. And so to your question, what I did one year, because we were facing an invasive species, is I used a drone to create a full 3D model of the forest, thinking that I could update that model every year and keep track of how the forest is changing. Turns out I would need a lot of terabytes and exobytes of data to store that and compare those models. So it was a little aspirational, but I guess the answer is eventually yes, I would love to do that.
That's awesome, man.
Best questions ever, I gotta say.
I'm sorry, man. I've been waiting for a long time. Like I've been looking forward to this one. So, Chappie, you want to jump in, or you good? Or you want me to keep rolling?
I just think it's funny, like KJ saying, so to use AI with the TSP of the third layer underneath, I'm going, did they kidnap Neil Peart? I know it's Alex Lifeson. I'm as big as Rush fan as any Canadian out there, so I know the difference between the two before you start. My daughter's name is Getty. That tells you how big a fan
there you go.
I am of Rush. And my son's name is Alex, and my last name is Neil O'Neill. So I couldn't go with a Neil O'Neill. That would have been a little too much. But no, this is I'm just some of the questions KJ's coming up with. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's wow.
Well, and I think indirectly we've answered the question of, how do nerds get into farming, and are all farmers nerds? And the answer is kind of yes.
Yeah.
Because this is where you really get to play with toys and no one interrupts you, and it's your job. So it's totally allowed. And one of the key most favorite toy of our arsenal, perhaps only to be dethroned by the robot, is we have a mini excavator. And if I had told little Jesse when he was a kid, one day when you're older, you will have your own digger. Whoa.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Life dream fulfilled.
That's crazy. So, all right. How do you think, there's this, I guess, the belief, like going back to the shows and then depicting the rural communities as just aloof and, not necessarily sophisticated. So how do you think rural communities can go from, being passive users to being sovereign designers of the digital infrastructure? Because clearly there's a coupling there that needs to happen. So how then do we start building the tools and networks and getting all the data coming tailored to that local environment?
Again, you're hitting them out of the park with these questions. I think to answer that indirectly, I sort of knew this before I moved here when I was living in the city, but I think I underestimated how much there is an urban-rural divide. Mm-hmm. How contemporary politics today is really is determined. I think if you want to look at how to solve partisanship, polarization, craziness in politics, I think the way to do it is to bridge the disconnect between cities and rural communities. I think that is the most important political and social problem we face. And I think technology could be that bridge. But to answer your question, how do rural communities kind of find their own independence, kind of foster their own technological sovereignty? Ironically, by making links with the cities. And these aren't links of subservience. These are how do I say this? I wanted to say almost parasitic links. The reverse brain drain, right? Historically, young kids would leave the country to go to the city. We need to reverse that. They're not just young, but old. There's a lot of people in the city who want to get out of the city and they don't know how. And a lot of rural communities are insular. They're kind of impenetrable. So it helps if you have an invite. It helps if you have a friend. It helps if you have a connection. Because the paradox is a lot of the technology suppliers are located in cities. So one of the advantages that I have as a novice farmer is I already mapped out the tech ecosystem in the nearby cities. Mm-hmm. So I already know how to go in, who to talk to, what to get, how to bring that stuff back. So there has to be links, right? We don't need the cities. in terms of expertise, in terms of culture, but we do in terms of shipping and transportation.
Yeah.
Right? Because most of this technology comes from elsewhere, even outside of the city, elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So there does, and the connection here is food, because there's all these trucks and vans that go into the city bringing food. Well, why not have them bringing technology coming back? Right? Like, why do we have empty loads? We need to make sure that we have maximized these supply chains. So I think, to answer your question, libraries. I do a lot of work around that, especially rural libraries. But I think it's important for rural communities to recognize that they can be just as intimidating as urban communities, and that there are a lot of friends and people, colleagues, vendors, suppliers in the city who you can make connections with, but it's a need to make those links explicit. Yeah. And that could be networks, that could be federations, that could be, cookouts. Like, there's lots of cultural ways that you can foster those connections. But I think it's like all the problems in our culture, it comes from us being isolated and separate from each other. And the urban-rural divide, I think, is at the core of our current societal problems. And I think it's an easy one to fix, quite frankly, because the differences aren't that great. It's just there's no dialogue. There's not a lot of talking.
Let me jump in on that. I think one of the things you said that resonates here is it used to be that the farmers would send their kids into the city, they'd get educated, and then we're at a point where you could say, all right, now I have my kids, I'm living in the city. Well, I'm going to send my kids to grandma and grandpa's farm, right? But that doesn't exist anymore. I don't have any farming family. I don't have any family that lives anywhere that's not urban or suburban. So even if I wanted to, so like Jesse, I could say, man, I would love to send my 15-year-old up to a farm in Canada for the summer or wherever, right? But I don't have those. Not only do I not have those connections and relationships, but the problem is, and we'll go back to the media, it's this sensationalism of violence and threat, and everybody's out to get you. So like, realistically, I could probably reach out and say, Jesse, hey man, I would love to send you a free laborer for 3 months. And you'd be like, you know what, Lance, great. Hey, we only know each other a little bit, but I trust you, you trust me. But then you have family members or whoever going, you sent your kid to Canada with, how do you even know that guy? Have you done a background check on him? How do you know he's not going to tie your son up for the next 3 or sell your son or what? And it's this worst case scenario that as a population we've all come under, especially when you start to realize first world wise, these are not really the threats that are truly what we need to be worried about. So I think you have a great idea there. Maybe the library needs to be on a relationship where we need to do what they used to do in old England. Like, hey, you know what? You give me one of your kids, I'll take one of your kids. And that way we can't do anything to each other or else the war starts.
Well, and there's a few things there I think we can flip. But to your point, the most important is trust. And that's where you need a kind of intermediary or an organization. I mean, churches could do this, for example, because there are a lot of churches who have both urban and rural congregations. Yeah. So they could be that channel of trust. But you touched upon something I'm gonna double down on here, because it speaks to both the urban-rural divide, but also the paradox of our culture. We are far too risk averse and safety obsessed, because the reality of farming is it is dangerous.
Yes.
Right? Like, my goats alone are dangerous. My dogs are dangerous, let alone farming equipment, which is dangerous. Like, life is dangerous. And unfortunately, we as a society have forgotten that. And I believe we have to allow kids to manage risk on their own. So, for example, I made a joke recently that did not go over well. To your point, Lance, I got a lot of blowback from people who are very politically correct. The federal Canadian government this summer announced a program that all kids under the age of 17 could take the train for free anywhere in the country. So Via Rail is like our Amtrak. And so it's a great deal, 17 and under, free.
Awesome, yeah.
But you have to be accompanied by an adult, and the adult tickets are not free.
Of course not.
So really, it's just a coupon to get families traveling. And so my objection was, why don't you let the kids travel for free? I did. Lots of other kids might, like these grandparents will pick them up at the other destination. They're just riding the train for free. There's lots of people on the train. There's like official, like, why not? So many people are like, oh, no, you can't do that. Oh, no. That to me is a problem, right? We need to allow kids to find room to get into danger, to get into trouble, so that they learn life and they learn who they can turn to. And we are in a society where we don't allow risk. We don't allow danger. So that's why, yes, my idea of having city, and I agree, it would be great if we were to send the city folks to university and college in rural communities and to work on farms. But I don't think it would work because people are like, oh, no, you might get injured because, you might get injured. That's farming.
Yeah, and that goes back to why there's such a divide between Gen X and millennials, is that Gen Xers, you go down the list. If we wanted to go to the mall with our friends, you jumped on the bus. If you came home and your mom and dad weren't there, well, it's because you worked. You let yourself in, you made some food during the summer. You got up, you left, and as long as you were home by whatever time you were supposed to be home, which was generally when the sun goes down, we didn't have a lot. We survived oh my gosh, you let your child drink out of a hose? Yeah. They're gonna get salmonella, tetracycline, whatever. It's like, dude, it's okay. It's not the best. Tap water is not the best, but drinking out of a hose is not going to kill you. And that's, it's interesting. We've just got I love that it's super frustrating, but the analysis is spot on about risk averseness.
And look, not to be cliche, but we are fundamentally talking about how we produce our food. And if we don't have enough people to actually harvest our food, grow our food, maintain our farms, we won't eat. And we are running into that problem because of the way in which the urban-rural divide is split. So we are going to have to figure some way to do it. And I keep seeing and meeting lots of people in cities who want out. They just don't know how to do it, or it's just so expensive. Like land is too expensive, right? So another way to do it, there's lots of people who own farms that have been left to rot. Take it away from them, give it to somebody else, right? Yeah. Use it or lose it is another philosophy that I think would be totally reasonable.
So I think that there's two parts there, because one, the idea would be that the more technology you're able to use, if you're able to go out and you're able to basically have a robot go in and plant and weed and harvest and all that, you're not going to need the same numbers. And I think that ultimately that kind of is the goal. But then now you run into people won't have jobs and all that. Look, but ultimately the number one thing is we need to have food. As long as society has food, you can generally figure things out. The reason that you had, wars that have always been started was over water and food. And as long as you have those two things in abundance, generally the people are going to be soft, and we're not going to go and fight you just because I'm not quite getting the hamburger I want.
I'll raise you even further. Right now, with the robot technology that is currently available in 2025 terms, we could have free food, easy.
Yeah.
And North America could produce enough free food to feed the Americas.
Yeah.
And South America's already producing lots of food too. Yeah. Right. So it could be done now, but there's a huge cultural, political problem that prevents us from doing so. It's literally socialism.
Well,
and that's a word that pisses a lot of people off.
So let me ask you a question about that, because I think that one of the big things I see, I'm a conservative, and so I see a lot of people say, well, look, you've got these subsidies to the big corporations, and you have the left saying big corporations are evil, but the right saying, well, hey, we need corporations. And I sit there and go, look, if we get rid of subsidies, now you're not socialist, right? And I don't see why the government should be picking winners and losers. But if at the same time you're going to say, look, we're going to allow some tax breaks, which I get are subsidies. If you're going to allow tax breaks to farms that produce X number or X amount more than they need on their own, I'm okay with things like that because ultimately it's a societal good. But once you get into that this and that of, like you said, socialism, and I'm against socialism because socialism has killed more people in the 20th century than anything, including war and disease. But now it's not true. Disease kill more people. But
no, let me hold you there because I hate that phrase, and I'll flip that phrase and say I'm a gun owner, and here in Canada, you actually have to go through a lot of hoops to get a firearms license to own guns. So I've never liked the phrase, guns kill people, right? Like people.
Well, it's going real fast, too.
Right. So socialism doesn't kill people. It's just an ideology. It's people who kill people.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And in that sense, nationalism has killed more people than socialism and capitalism and fascism combined. It's just a question of which ism you pick, and you could scale it up. So to bring it back down and to throw it back to KJ, because ostensibly this was his idea. What if you had a free food system run by robots that was quote unquote socialist, but not controlled by the government? It was controlled by local communities. So those local communities grew the food, distributed the food. And because of the system we're using, there would be lots of surplus. And the only caveat was you can't sell your surplus.
Yeah.
You can get as fat as you want. You can have as many treats as you want, but whatever surplus you have, you got to send that away. You got to give that to the people who are not as fortunate as you. And that's the commitment. So do whatever you want, grow whatever you want, do it however you want, but you can't keep the extras. Use as much as you want.
So so let me just make sure I caught what you said there. So you're saying the government will give federal land to anybody who wants it under those terms of you get to keep.
Here's where I have to stop.
I'm curious how do you get to there?
I can't comment on federal land because as a non-American, I don't know what the politics of federal land is.
Does Canada not have federally owned land?
No, we're complicated. We've got crown land.
Oh.
And crown land is literally owned by that guy, Charles. Not by the government, by that guy, Charles.
Okay. So same type
we don't
of deal.
Have but it's not.
Okay.
No. Federal land, the federal government could say we want to do X with it. But our federal government can't because Charles owns it.
Yes, Charles owns it.
You guys should have a revolution.
I agree. It's so absurd.
Sounds like some cheese going in the harbor.
Why don't we assume? Why don't we do this? Why don't we assume that the land has already been distributed?
Yes.
Because it is.
Dude, if I was Canadian, I would be like, what are they going to do? Come get it back? Bring it on, dude.
I know. This is what I'm saying.
You want Americans to start loving Canadians again? All you'd have to do is say, hey, England, guess what? We're taking all the land we want, and you can't do shite about it. By the way, U.S., hey, please help us out on that. And Americans would be, yeah, we're there with you. Let's go.
That's why I said if it was seduction instead of threat, we would be having a different conversation here, right? Like, again, let me take one step back. If you think American politics is crazy, you should try Canadian politics. The only difference is it's not televised, right? Ever since SCTV went off the air, there's just no way to see the craziness of Canadian politics. You have to be at, the Bush party. You have to be at the lake. You have to be, at that place where it happens. And it is crazy, absolutely crazy for the reason you described. We live in a crazy country. But yes, we were talking about redistribution of land. I'm saying the land's already been distributed. The question is, where do you get your seed from? Where do you get your fertilizer from? Where do you get your robots from? Right? That's what farmers need year to year. That's what the local community could provide without any help from the federal government. Yeah. So you could do this bottom up. It doesn't need to be top down. Right? So imagine, here's a scenario. Imagine, to make this real quick, America and Canada merge, friendly, It's run by people like Trump, the Canadian equivalent, and it falls apart due to incompetence. So all of a sudden, you no longer have an overarching government. You just have states and municipalities, and everyone has to figure it out for themselves. But they've got the internet to communicate. That could be a scenario in which every community has autonomy. Every community sets its own rules, sets its own morality, sets its own culture, but we all share our food because we all have these robots that make it really easy to grow way more food than we need. And I like oranges, and you can't grow oranges where I live. And Florida likes maple syrup to go with their pancakes and sausages. So we're happy to share.
I think that is good luck.
Yeah, pie in the sky.
Yeah.
Good luck. Yeah. Yeah. I think, but ultimately, I think that, just to go religious for a second, that is the idea of the ultimate Christian ideal, is that we are all truly, and I will say this with all seriousness and all understanding of history, Marxism was not that far off. It's Marxism plus humans is a major problem, because, when Marxism says to each man according to his needs, okay, that's fine. But the problem is, I want more. And that's human nature. And I don't think we'll overcome that human nature. And if you say to a farmer, well, okay, you're going to go out and you're going to farm this land, and you can have all your excess, and we'll give you the land, and we'll give you this, and we'll give you that. They're still going to say, yeah, but how come that dude is able to buy a nicer car than I have? And that's where the human nature falls apart. And so I like the idea of taking crown land or federal land or whatever and saying, okay, we will give these to the corporations that are willing to donate the robotics and the software and those things to only produce the food. And if you want to do it, I'm sure there's a way to do it. We're not there yet.
You said something I think really important, which, you use the word greed. I think in our context, competition is a better way to phrase it.
Maybe.
Because if you say that one says, well, why does that guy have a better looking tractor than I do? Because they don't care about cars, right? They care about how pretty their tractor is.
Sure.
You'd be like, well, because he worked harder, right? Because he, did whatever. So I agree. There still has to be incentives. There still has to be a certain level of competition. And I think that competition makes sense when it's local, when you can see who you're competing with and understand how they're competing. Versus the problem with global markets is there's no way that the American worker can compete with the Vietnamese worker or the Bangladeshi worker, right? And that's where globalization became really problematic, because instead of saying to factory workers in Indiana, we'll pay you $20 an hour, the Chinese workers were like, oh, we'll do $2 an hour. And the Vietnamese workers were like, we'll do 50 cents an hour. Like, that's not fair. Versus if you had everyone in Indiana saying, okay, who will do this for the right wage? That's when everyone in Indiana can look at themselves and go, all right, no one go under $20 an hour, because that's how much it costs to live in Indiana. There's a scale there that makes it a little more manageable.
But see, I don't think that's where the scale works, because define local, because even northern Indiana is very different than southern Indiana. And if you say, hey, people in Saskatchewan, we're competing for wheat harvest with those in Nebraska. Well, that's kind of local, but even local farmers, I still think if you have, hey, me and the Smith farm, we're both fighting for our survival because we both have wheat that we're growing, then, how, or what happens when some of those things that are out of your control go in. It's just, there's so many, all I'm saying is the variables.
You hit it on the nose right there. You hit it on the nose right there. All of this logic fits to other industries, but not food. Yeah. Because there's no such thing as having too much food, right? You can waste food if you don't process it. You can waste food if you don't move it fast enough. This is the problem with Saskatchewan, for example. Saskatchewan's in the middle of nowhere, and there aren't enough rail lines every year to get the wheat out of Saskatchewan. So the issue with food is a different kind of competition, right? Whoever produces the most gets the greatest reward. But if you don't produce enough, you're still producing lots. So again, we're getting into the details, but I enjoy these conversations because they do speak to the commonality that exists amongst people who would otherwise politically disagree, because we do all eat food. That is the one thing that unites us.
Not all of us have people doing our bedrooms up, though, like KJ does.
You know what? Listen, hey. I'm from.
It's just funny how you see that go through.
Yeah, I am a transient. This is my last day of being a transient. And then
I just saw that. It's so funny looking.
I was earlier thinking not everyone has dogs who are carried like babies.
Right? Oh my gosh.
Is that a doodle by chance?
That is a it's a mini Bernese mountain dog poodle hybrid. So
there you go. I had a hunch. Doodles tend to be treated like babies. Yes.
And we had there's a whole story behind that we won't go into, but the short version is it took me 15 years to get a dog from my wife to finally say yes. And then it took another year before she said yes to a second one, which was legitimately the biggest surprise in our 25-year marriage.
Yes.
So
yeah, we did not domesticate wolves. Wolves domesticated us.
Oh yeah.
And they're still doing it to this day.
Yep.
Absolutely. So I know, to get back to the farming here in, well, before we moved out to California, we were seeing a lot of.
Hey, KJ, before you get in that question, I'm going to pop smoke. I got some stuff I got to do tonight. So I'll let you finish off with Jesse. Jesse, hey, great. Anytime you want to have me on MetaView just to talk Rush or the craziness between federal lands or the crown and educate me and have some real conversations about the differences, I'm there. You just let me know. Right, but I'm going to say goodnight for tonight. So great to meet you. Thank you. And
I would keep talking.
No, KJ, keep going. Hey, finish off your question, but I'm going to drop. Get your last question, KJ.
All right, Tappy.
Right.
Bye, Tappy. All right, so I was talking about the communities and the micro farming that seems to be taking over in these urban sectors, right? You even here in California, down in Los Angeles, you're starting to see these community garden centers where people just collectively bring. Are you familiar with the stone soup?
Yes.
Story about. So it's essentially that, just in an agricultural sense, where one guy was like, "Hey man, I can grow some potatoes over here. You get some tomatoes, and we'll just all bring it together for the good of the community." I feel like there's a way where we can, implement that ideology with the advent of AI and robots to where we can make this all happen. Even if you have a loss of jobs, say manual labor in terms of robots, you still need the engineers and the I guess directors, for lack of a better term, to direct and send out the robots and to do maintenance on them and so on and so forth. So the idea, and it's just a matter of we have the answer. It's just a matter of going backwards to get to couple the answer with the problem, right? So we know where we want to be. We know what the issue is. Now it's just a matter of putting the framework together to make it work.
Yes and no. I mean, on the one hand, I absolutely agree with the way you use the word framework, because it is a framework, right? You have to get people to kind of understand how the parts all connect to each other. But I think the keystone or the linchpin in all that is knowledge. And your point about some of the urban gardening and community gardens that we're seeing in all sorts of urban environments, they're important because the knowledge of gardening, right, or the knowledge of botany in terms of plants and how those plants work, especially when you get into heritage plants and the types of plants that aren't corporate, that aren't part of the traditional food system, there's a lot of knowledge that comes with that still has to be in a human being.
Yeah.
So, when we were talking about the automated food system, Lance kept imagining that there wouldn't be any humans, that there'd just be robots. And even though the farmers may not be doing the kind of heavy labor that they used to, you still need people who understand this stuff. Because while we can use robots and we can use AI, those systems will never think. They'll never understand. They still need someone who has the ideology, who has the knowledge to program what they should do, to tell them, here's how the garden's laid out. these are the plants that we want you to cultivate versus these are the plants we want you to blast with your laser because they're not welcome here. Right. And that's where I think the value of community gardening, the value of these kind of food coalitions where you have, community restaurants, community groceries, and community garden plots. As a tangent, the last couple of years I was in Toronto, I was brainstorming ways that like condos, Toronto has these big glass condos, how they could be growing food in the south facing windows and sharing with their neighbors. But there is still a kind of basic level of like how to garden and why soil is important and when to water and when not to water. And even though most of that can be automated, you still need people who have that knowledge, share that knowledge, promote that knowledge, right? Teachers, the kind of each one teach one. So yes, 100% to the framework, but we have to remember that the machines are only half the part. The other half are the visionaries, the poets, the revolutionaries who really get everyone around the idea that food is more than something you just go to the store and buy. That the more effort you put into making it, the more effort you put into growing it, the better it tastes, right? The better you feel about the community, the more connections you have with the community. So again, I love the way you use framework. I love the language you use because it speaks to the relationships that we need to be building to make this happen. We're in a world right now where there's a bunch of us who are kind of turned on to the idea. But we're still kind of weirdos, right? We're still the exception to the rule. Most people just think I'm going to go to the store or I'm going to go to the restaurant. So I think that more and more people are going to tune into this because the other side of this is health, right? That your health gets way better when you're eating healthy food. But unfortunately, most people can't afford healthy food. So it's a bit of a paradox. I'm rambling, but I think you get the idea.
Man, listen, you are perfect, brother. This has been everything I expected and more, man. So we usually save like 45-minute blocks for our guests, but you are rocking and rolling, man. So I want to give you your final thoughts. I am so appreciative of your time, man. This was everything I expected and more. So let everybody know your social, let them know where they can reach out to you and how they can follow up with you and follow your platform. And then you get the final word, my brother. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Thank you, KJ. And I mean it when I say you've asked the best questions anyone has ever asked me. No exaggeration or hesitation. MetaViews is my brand, METAVIEWS. That's me on Instagram. That's me on Substack. If you Google that, in theory, I come up. Or just the name, Jesse Hirsh. I've been rapping on the internet for 30 years now. Sometimes I have kids come up to me and show me stuff I wrote as a teenager on the internet back in the 90s. So there's a lot of stuff out there if you're really that crazy, or when I get arrested, it's all going to be used against me in a court of law. So my only last word will be, I hope I don't end up in prison by the United States government at some point. That's part of why we Canadians were so afraid of being taken over. But if I do, KJ, I'm going to reach out to you and hope to get you on the Free Jesse movement, as absurd as that might be.
You got it.
Thanks. This is a great
I
conversation.
will be out front with my picket signs, leading the charge, man.
Right on.
Thank you so much, brother. This has been fantastic, man. On behalf of me and Chappie, who had to cut loose, man, we appreciate it. We got to get you back on so we can wrap some more. I still had 10 more questions left in the queue, man. So I got to get you back. I'd
love to do this
we'll
again.
Work that out.
Sure.
Man, I appreciate you, brother. All right, I will get this cut up and pushed out by midweek, man, and I'll send you the links, brother. Thank you again so much.
Right on. Thank you. Again, it was a pleasure. Right, seriously, this is one of the best conversations I've had in a couple of months.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you. All right, yeah, howdy. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Gee, mate, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
All right, yo, let's get into it.
Try to take over the world.
speech and freedom
Try
of
to
conscience.
take over the world.
And greatest chaplain in the world, Mr.
Try
Lance
to
O'Neill.
take over the world.